I stood alone at the front of the small chapel in Asheville, North Carolina, wearing the simple ivory dress I had chosen because it felt like me. The string quartet played softly. Theo stood beside me, squeezing my hand every few seconds, as if to remind me I wasn't completely alone. The pews on my side of the aisle were empty, except for 3 white chairs with "reserved for family" signs that no one ever sat in. My own family had chosen my brother's engagement party instead. The officiant cleared his throat and asked the question no one ever wants to hear on their wedding day. If anyone knows of any reason why these two should not be joined in marriage, silence. No one objected. No one was even there to object. If you have ever watched the most important day of your life happen without the people who were supposed to love you most, drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. My name is Elena Voss, and this is the story of how my family skipped my wedding for my brother's engagement party, and how 11 days later, my mother accidentally opened the one private text I had sent to my new husband that finally forced her to see the damage they had done. I grew up in a sprawling Victorian house on the edge of Asheville. My parents, Victor and Caroline Voss, owned the largest luxury event planning company in Western North Carolina. They orchestrated weddings for governors, corporate retreats for Fortune 500 companies, and lavish debutante balls for old Southern families. My older brother Julian was their golden child, the one who stayed in Asheville, joined the family business, and got engaged to the daughter of a well-known tech investor. I was the younger daughter who had always marched to a different beat. I became a high school literature teacher because books had always felt safer than boardrooms. I met Marcus during a teacher training workshop in Raleigh. He was a quiet, kind history teacher who proposed to me on a hiking trail with nothing but a simple ring and a promise that our life together would be built on love, not appearances. When I told my family we had set the wedding date for October 14th, my mother barely looked up from her calendar. "That weekend is impossible, Elena," she said. "Julian's engagement party is the same Saturday. We've already booked the mountain lodge, 200 guests, the investor's entire family. It's critical for the business." I thought she was joking. "Mom, it's my wedding." She finally looked at me, her expression polite but firm. "Honey, it's not like you're having a huge affair. We can do a nice dinner for you and Marcus the following weekend. Julian's party is non-negotiable. The future of the company depends on these connections." My father didn't even glance up from his laptop. "Your mother's right. Business comes first." Julian just shrugged from across the table. "Sorry, sis. Maybe you can move your date." I sat there in the same dining room where I had announced every milestone of my life and felt something inside me quietly break. I didn't fight them. I didn't cry in front of them. I simply nodded, drove home to Marcus, and we decided to get married anyway. Small, intimate, and completely ours. We sent the invitations anyway. My parents RSVP'd, regretfully unable to attend. Julian and his fiancée sent a generic gift basket with a note that said, "We'll celebrate with you later." On the morning of October 14th, I woke up in the cozy cabin Marcus had rented in the mountains. I put on my dress, looked in the mirror, and told myself I didn't need them there to be happy. But when I walked down the aisle and saw those 3 empty chairs with the reserved signs, the hurt hit me harder than I expected. Marcus held my hand the entire ceremony. His family cheered loud enough for both sides. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, I kissed him and tried to focus only on the joy in his eyes. The reception was small and perfect. String lights in the trees, live acoustic music, friends who actually showed up. I danced with my new husband until my feet hurt. I laughed until my cheeks ached. But every time my eyes drifted to the empty head table, the ache in my chest grew. 11 days later, I was back at work, teaching my juniors about Pride and Prejudice, when I decided to send the text. It was meant only for Marcus, a late-night message I typed while sitting on our couch after a long day. I keep pretending I'm fine, that they weren't at our wedding. But I'm not fine. They chose Julian's party over our marriage. I don't know if I can ever forgive them for making me feel so small on the most important day of my life. I love you for marrying me anyway. I hit send and put my phone down. I had no idea my mother still had my old phone from college. She had borrowed it the week before the wedding because hers was being repaired and she needed to check vendor emails. She still remembered the passcode. She opened that text while sitting in her car outside the mountain lodge after Julian's engagement party. And that single private message changed everything. Everything was finally starting to feel like real healing, or so I thought. But the real reckoning, the one that would force my family to confront exactly what they had done, was only just beginning. The text I sent Marcus was still glowing on my screen when my phone started ringing. It was my mother. I stared at her name until the call went to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. On the fourth ring, I finally answered, my voice flat. Hello? Sienna? Her voice cracked immediately. I read the message you sent Marcus. I didn't mean to. I was just checking my emails on your old phone and it popped up. I'm so sorry. I sat down on the edge of the couch, the living room suddenly feeling too small. You read my private text? I know, I shouldn't have, but the things you wrote about the wedding, about us choosing Julian's party, Sienna, I had no idea you felt that way. I let out a short, bitter laugh. You had no idea? Mom, you told me to my face that Julian's engagement party was more important for the business. You RSVP'd no to my wedding. You didn't even send flowers. How could you not know? She started crying on the other end. Real, ugly crying. We thought you understood. We thought you knew how critical that event was. The investor's family was there. Your brother's future. Stop. My voice came out sharper than I intended. My future mattered too. My marriage mattered too. But you made it very clear where I ranked. Marcus walked in from the kitchen, saw my face, and sat down beside me without speaking. He took my free hand and held it tight. My mother was still crying. I'm coming over, she said suddenly. Right now, I need to see you. No, I said. Not tonight. I need space. She didn't listen. 20 minutes later, her car pulled into our driveway. I watched from the window as she got out, still in the navy dress she had worn to Julian's engagement party. She looked smaller than I remembered. I opened the door before she could knock. We stood there on the porch in the cool October air, the mountains dark behind her. I'm so sorry, she said again. I read that message and it felt like someone punched me in the chest. You said you don't think you can forgive us. Sienna, please tell me what we can do to fix this. I crossed my arms against the chill. You can start by respecting the fact that I just got married and you weren't there. You can stop pretending the business is more important than your daughter's life. And you can give me time instead of showing up at my house at 9 o'clock at night. She wiped her eyes. I know. I panicked. I thought if I came right away, I could make it better. That's the problem, Mom. You always think you can fix things with one big dramatic moment. But this isn't something you can fix in one night. Marcus stepped out onto the porch then. He stood beside me, quiet and steady. My mother looked at him, then back at me. "I'm sorry I ruined your wedding day," she said, voice breaking. "I'm sorry I made you feel like you didn't matter." I didn't answer right away. The words hung between us in the cold air. Finally, I said, "I need you to leave now. I need time to think." She nodded, tears still falling, and walked back to her car. She drove away slowly, like she was hoping I would call her back. Marcus pulled me inside and closed the door. "You okay?" he asked. I shook my head. I don't know anymore. The next morning at school, I moved through my classes like I was underwater. My juniors were analyzing Pride and Prejudice, and all I could think about was how my own family had turned my wedding day into a plot point they could skip. Planning period, my phone lit up again. This time it was my father. "We're having an emergency family meeting tonight at the house. Your mother told us what happened. Please come. We need to talk about this as a family." I stared at the message. I typed back, "I'm not coming. I already said what I needed to say." His reply was instant. "Sienna, this is important. The business is in trouble, and we need to present a united front to the investors. Your mother is falling apart. Just one meeting. That's all we're asking." There it was again. The business. Always the business. I turned my phone off and left it in my desk drawer for the rest of the day. When I got home that evening, Marcus had already made dinner. We ate on the back porch and talked about everything except my family. For a few hours, I felt normal again. Then, at 8:45, my brother Julian's name appeared on my phone. I answered because part of me still hoped he might be different. "Hey, sis," he said. He sounded tired. "Look, I know Mom and Dad are being intense, but the investor pulled out after the party got canceled. The company is really struggling. Mom's been crying all day. Can you at least come to the house for an hour, just so we can figure out how to move forward?" I closed my eyes. "Julian, I got married 2 weeks ago. You chose a party over my wedding. Now you're asking me to drop everything because the business is struggling?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I know we screwed up," he said finally. "I should have told Mom and Dad that your wedding mattered more. I was selfish. I'm sorry." His apology sounded genuine, but I had heard genuine apologies before. "I need more than sorry," I told him. "I need time. And I need you all to stop treating my life like it's optional." He didn't argue. He just said, "Okay, I get it. Take the time you need." When I hung up, I felt exhausted. Marcus wrapped his arms around me from behind. "You did good," he whispered. But the next morning, everything changed again. I woke up to a long text from my mother. It was 2,300 words long. She had written it at 4 a.m. She poured out every regret, every moment she wished she could take back, every time she had put the business before me. She ended it with, "I'm stepping away from the company. I told my father last night. I'm going to start volunteering at the library literacy program, if you'll let me. No publicity, no big gestures. Just me showing up for you the way I should have years ago." I read the entire message twice. Then I put my phone down and cried for the first time since the wedding day. Because for the first time, it felt like they were finally hearing me. But I was still not sure if this was real change or just another crisis that would pass once the business pressure eased. And the phone call I received 2 hours later would make that question even harder to answer. I read my mother's long message 3 times before I could breathe normally again. The words were raw, almost desperate. She wrote about lying awake every night since the wedding, replaying the emptied chairs, the way I had smiled through the ceremony like nothing was wrong. She admitted she had spent years measuring love by how useful someone was to the family business. She said she was stepping away from the company completely, that she had already told my father and Julian the night before. She wanted to volunteer at the library literacy program. No publicity, no photos. Just her showing up every Saturday if I would let her. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter and stared at the steam rising from my coffee. Marcus walked in, still in his pajama pants, and saw my face. What happened? I slid the phone toward him. He read the message in silence, then looked at me. She's trying, he said gently. This time, it feels different. I nodded, but I wasn't sure I believed it yet. I had heard promises before, big promises, expensive promises. This one felt quieter, but I had learned the hard way that quiet could still be temporary. The rest of the day passed in a strange fog. I taught my classes, helped students find books for their essays, and tried not to check my phone every 5 minutes. When the final bell rang, I drove home slowly, the mountain roads winding through the late afternoon light. Marcus had dinner ready when I walked in, grilled salmon and roasted vegetables, the kind of simple meal we both loved. We ate on the back porch and talked about everything except my family. For a few hours, it felt normal again. Then, at 8:17 p.m., my father called. I almost didn't answer, but something in my chest told me I had to. His voice was heavy, the way it got when he was carrying too much. Sienna, your mother told us what she wrote to you. She's serious about stepping back, but the company is in worse shape than we let on. The investor pulled out completely after we canceled the engagement party. The bank is threatening to call the loan in 30 days if we don't show some kind of stability. I closed my eyes and leaned against the porch railing. So you're calling me because you need me to fix it? I asked. No, he said quickly. I'm calling because I don't want to hide anything from you anymore. I'm telling you the truth, the full truth. We're going to lose the house if this goes bad. Your mother is already pulling away from the business, and I'm scared she's going to blame herself forever if we lose everything. I stayed quiet. My father's voice cracked slightly. I'm not asking you to save us. I'm asking you to know the truth before you decide how much distance you want from us. Because if we lose the company, we're going to need to sell the house on the hill, the one you grew up in, and I don't want you to hear about it from someone else. The house on the hill. The same house where I had announced my engagement, where I had cried in my childhood bedroom the night they told me they couldn't come to my wedding. I felt a wave of something I couldn't name. Anger, sadness, exhaustion, all mixed together. I need time to think, I told him. Don't call me again tonight. He agreed without arguing. When I hung up, Marcus was standing in the doorway watching me. They're losing the house? He asked. I nodded. We sat on the porch swing for a long time without speaking. The mountains were dark against the night sky, the air cool and smelling of pine. I don't know what to do, I finally said. Part of me wants to walk away completely and protect what we have. The other part of me remembers being 8 years old and falling asleep in that house while my mom read to me. I don't want to watch them lose everything. But I also don't want to be the person they only call when they're desperate. Marcus took my hand. You don't have to decide tonight, he said. But whatever you choose, I'm here. The next morning, I woke up to another long message from my mother. This one was shorter. She said she had already started the paperwork to transfer her shares to Julian and Claire. She said she had signed up for the library volunteer training and would be there every Saturday starting next week. She ended with, I'm not asking you to believe me yet. I'm only asking you to watch me show up. I read it while drinking coffee on the porch. Then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I replied, "Okay, Saturday at 10 a.m. for story time. Just you, no one else." Her answer came back in seconds. "I'll be there. Thank you." The week passed slowly. I taught my classes. I planned the Christmas storytime event. I tried not to think about the bank deadline or the house on the hill. Marcus and I went for long hikes in the mountains and talked about our future. Maybe a bigger house one day. Maybe kids. Maybe just the two of us and our books. On Friday night, my brother Julian sent a single text. "I know you're angry with all of us. I don't blame you. But Mom is really trying. She's different since the wedding. I think losing you scared her more than losing the company ever could. Thank you for giving her a chance." I didn't reply. Saturday morning, I arrived at the library early to set up the storytime rugs and twinkling lights. At 9:55, my mother walked in carrying a tote bag full of picture books she had bought herself. No designer clothes, no mention of clients or parties. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair in a ponytail. She helped me arrange the chairs without being asked. When the kids started arriving, she sat on the floor with them, reading the Polar Express in a soft, gentle voice I hadn't heard since I was little. She helped a shy 5-year-old turn the pages. She laughed when a toddler put a paper snowflake in her hair. After the last child left, we cleaned up together in silence. As we were folding the last table, she spoke. "I know one Saturday doesn't fix 4 years of hurt," she said. "But I'm going to keep showing up. Every week. No excuses. No business emergencies. Just me being your mother the way I should have been all along." I looked at her for a long moment. "I believe you want to," I said, "but I still need time to trust it." She nodded, eyes shining with tears she didn't let fall. "I understand." She left after that, and I stood alone in the empty children's section, surrounded by the drawings my students had made. For the first time in months, the ache in my chest felt a little smaller. But when I got home that evening, there was a new envelope taped to our front door. Inside was a letter from my father and a set of keys. The letter said, "Sienna, your mother told us about the library today. We're proud of her, and we're proud of you. The bank meeting is next week. We're going to lose the house. We've accepted it. But before we do, we wanted you to have this. These are the keys to the house on the hill. It's yours if you want it. Not as a payment, not as a bribe, just because it was always supposed to be part of your life, and we took that from you. We love you. Dad." I stood in the doorway holding the keys and the letter, the mountains dark behind me. My family was finally trying to give me back something I thought I had lost forever. But accepting it would mean stepping back into the world I had fought so hard to leave. I stood in the doorway holding the keys and the letter, the mountains dark behind me. The metal felt cold and heavy in my palm. These were the same keys I used to carry on a pink lanyard when I was 16. Back when the big Victorian house on the hill still felt like home. Now they were being handed back to me, like a peace offering, while my family was about to lose everything. Marcus stepped out onto the porch and saw my face. He didn't ask questions. He just took the letter from my other hand and read it quietly while I stared at the keys. When he finished, he folded the paper and looked at me. "They're really losing the house," he said. I nodded. We sat on the porch swing together in the cold night air. The only sound was the creak of the chains and the distant call of an owl. I kept turning the keys over and over in my fingers. I don't know what to do with these, I said finally. Part of me wants to drive up there right now and walk through every room. The other part of me is terrified that accepting them means I'm letting them back in the way they want. Marcus put his arm around me. You don't have to decide tonight, he said. The house isn't going anywhere tomorrow. Sleep on it. But I didn't sleep much. The next morning, I drove to the library early, even though it was my day off. I needed the quiet. I needed the colorful rugs and the smell of old books and the drawings my students had taped to the walls. This was my world now. This was the life I had built when they told me I was nothing without the family business. I was rearranging the picture books when my phone rang. It was my father. I answered on the third ring. Sienna, he said, voice rough like he hadn't slept either. Your mother told me you got the keys. I know it's a lot. I just wanted you to know that the bank meeting is this Friday. If we can't show some kind of stability, they're taking the house. We're not asking you to fix it. I wanted you to have the keys before it's too late. I sat down on one of the tiny beanbag chairs in the children's section. I'm not coming to the meeting, I said. I understand, he replied. There was no anger in his voice, only exhaustion. But if you ever want to see the house one last time, the keys are yours. No strings, no conditions. He hung up after that. I stayed on the beanbag chair for a long time, surrounded by picture books about families and homes and belonging. I thought about the bedroom I grew up in, the window seat where I used to read for hours, the kitchen where my mother used to let me stir cookie dough when I was little. That afternoon, I drove up the winding road to the house on the hill. The gate was open. No one was home. I parked in the circular driveway and sat in the car for 10 minutes before I could make myself get out. The key turned easily in the front door. Inside, the house smelt the same, lemon polish and old wood and the faint scent of my mother's favorite candles. Everything was exactly as I remembered, except it felt hollow now. The big dining table where they had told me my wedding didn't matter, the staircase where I had taken prom pictures alone because they were too busy with a client event. I walked through every room slowly. My old bedroom was exactly the way I left it 4 years ago. The books I loved were still on the shelves. The quilt my grandmother made was still folded at the foot of the bed. I sat on the edge of the mattress and cried for the girl who used to live here, the girl who had tried so hard to be enough for them. When I finally came downstairs, my mother was standing in the foyer. She must have seen my car. She didn't look surprised to see me. I came to check on a few things, she said softly. I didn't know you would be here. I wiped my eyes. I needed to see it one more time. She nodded and didn't try to hug me. Instead, she walked into the kitchen and came back with 2 glasses of sweet tea, the way she used to when I was little. We sat on the bottom step of the grand staircase together. I'm really stepping away from the company, she said after a long silence. The paperwork is done. Julian and Claire are taking over. I'm going to focus on the literacy program at the library. I already signed up for training. I looked at her profile. Why now? I asked. Why not 4 years ago when I told you I wanted to be a teacher? She stared at the floor. Because I was scared. Scared of losing the life we build. Scared of admitting that maybe I had been wrong about what success looks like. When I read that text you sent Marcus, it was like someone held up a mirror and showed me exactly who I had become. I didn't like what I saw. We sat there for almost an hour, talking about small things. Not the business, Not the bank, just memories. The time I fell off my bike in the driveway and she carried me inside. The Christmas when I got my first library card. The way she used to read to me every night. When I finally stood up to leave, she didn't try to stop me. "I'll see you at story time on Saturday," she asked. I nodded. "Yeah, I'll see you there." I drove home feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The keys to the house were still in my pocket, but they didn't feel like a burden anymore. They felt like a choice I could make when I was ready. That night, Marcus and I cooked dinner together and laughed about nothing important. For the first time since the wedding, I felt like I could breathe. But the next morning, everything changed again. My phone rang at 6:15 a.m. It was Julian. His voice was shaking. "Sienna, you need to come to the house. Right now. Dad had a heart attack. He's in the ER. Mom's losing it. Please, we need you." I stood in the kitchen in my pajamas, the phone pressed to my ear, while the coffee maker gurgled behind me. The keys to the house were still on the counter where I had left them the night before. And now, the man who once told me I was dead to the family was fighting for his life in a hospital bed. I looked at Marcus, who had just walked into the kitchen. He didn't say anything. He just nodded. I grabbed my keys and drove to the hospital with my heart in my throat. When I got there, my mother was sitting in the waiting room, her face pale and terrified. Julian was pacing. Claire was on the phone with someone from the company. The moment my mother saw me, she stood up and walked straight into my arms. "He's in surgery," she whispered against my shoulder. "They said it was massive. Sienna, I don't know what I'll do if I lose him." I held her while she cried. For the first time in 4 years, I wasn't thinking about the wedding or the empty chairs or the business. I was just thinking about my father lying on an operating table. And I realized that no matter how much they had hurt me, some ties are harder to cut than others. The doctor came out 2 hours later with news that would change everything once again. He still had his surgical cap on, the mask hanging around his neck. His scrubs were wrinkled and damped with sweat. The four of us stood up at the same time like we had been pulled by the same string. My mother's hand found mine without thinking. I didn't pull away. "Mr. Voss made it through the surgery," the doctor said. "It was a major heart attack, but we were able to clear the blockage. He's in the ICU now. He's stable, but he's not out of the woods yet. The next 24 hours will tell us a lot." My mother let out a sound that was half sob, half relief. Julian sank back into his chair like his legs had given out. Claire rubbed his shoulder. I stayed standing, still holding my mother's hand. "Can we see him?" she asked, voice small. "Not yet," the doctor said gently. "He needs to rest. One person at a time once he's awake." He asked for Elena before they put him under. The room went completely quiet. My mother turned to me, eyes wide. "He asked for you," she whispered. I didn't know what to feel. My father, the man who had once told me I was dead to the family, had asked for me while they were wheeling him into surgery. The doctor gave us a few more details about monitors and medications, then left us in the waiting room. We sat there for hours. My mother kept her hand in mine the whole time. Julian stared at the floor. Claire brought us terrible hospital coffee and sandwiches from the cafeteria that none of us ate. At some point in the middle of the night, a nurse came out and said my father was awake and asking for me again. I stood up on shaky legs. My mother squeezed my hand one last time. "Go," she said. "He needs to see you." The ICU was quiet except for the beeps of machines. My father looked small in the bed, tubes and wires everywhere, his face pale against the white pillow. His eyes opened when I walked in. "Sienna," he said, voice hoarse and weak. I sat in the chair beside the bed. I didn't know what to say. He reached for my hand. His grip was faint,
But there, I was wrong. About the wedding, about everything. I thought the business was the only thing that mattered. When they put me under, all I could think about was that I might never get to tell you I'm sorry. Tears slipped down my cheeks before I could stop them. I was so angry at you. For so long. I know. His voice cracked. I deserve it. But I'm asking for the chance to be your father again. Not the one who ran the company, just your father. I stayed with him until the nurse made me leave. When I walked back into the waiting room, my mother, Julian, and Claire were all still there. My mother stood up immediately. "How is he?" "He's awake," I said. "He talked to me." She started crying again, but this time she smiled through it. The next few days became a strange rhythm. I went to the hospital every morning before school and every evening after. I taught my classes during the day like normal. Marcus brought me dinner at the hospital and sat with me in the waiting room when I needed him. My family was there constantly, but they gave me space. No pressure, no business talk, just quiet presence. On the fourth day, my father was moved to a regular room. He looked better, color returning to his face. When I walked in, he patted the bed beside him. "Sit with me," he said.
I sat. He didn't talk about the company. He talked about the time I was 8 and fell out of the oak tree in the backyard, and he carried me inside. I sat, and he didn't talk about the company. He talked about the time I was 8 and fell out of the oak tree in the backyard, and he carried me inside, singing silly songs to keep me from crying. He talked about how proud he was when I got my teaching job, even though he never told me. He apologized again, slower this time, like every word hurt. "I'm selling my shares too," he said quietly. "Julian and Claire will run the company. Your mother and I are going to retire. We're going to travel. We're going to be grandparents one day if you and Marcus let us." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I told him about the kids in my class who light up when I read to them. I told him about the little girl who finally read her first full sentence because of a book I gave her. I told him how much I loved the life I had built. He listens like he was hearing me for the first time. When I left that evening, my mother was waiting outside the room. "He looks better," she said, "because you're here." I didn't know what to say to that. The following Saturday, my mother showed up at the library for story time, exactly like she promised. She wore jeans and a sweater. She read to the kids with the same gentle voice I remembered from when I was little. After the session, she helped me clean up without being asked. As we were putting away the last chairs, she spoke softly. "I know one Saturday doesn't erase the wedding day," she said, "but I'm going to keep coming every week, no matter what." I nodded. "I believe you," I said. And for the first time, I actually did. But on Monday morning, everything shifted again. My phone rang while I was in the middle of teaching. I let it go to voicemail. When the class ended, I checked it. It was Julian. His voice was shaking in the message. "Sienna, the bank just called. They're moving forward with foreclosure on the house. They want it empty by the end of the month. Mom and Dad are devastated. I know you said you needed space, but the house is going to be gone soon. If you want any of your old things, now is the time." I sat at my desk, staring at the phone. The house on the hill, the one I had grown up in, the one they had just given me the keys to, was about to be taken away. And my family was asking me once again
to help them carry the weight. I looked around my classroom at the colorful posters and the stack of essays waiting to be graded. This was my life now. But the house on the hill was still part of my story. And the decision I made in the next 24 hours would decide whether I walked away from it forever or whether I finally stepped back in on my own terms. The keys felt heavier than they should have as I drove up the winding road to the house on the hill the next morning. I had barely slept. Marcus had held me through the night while I stared at the ceiling, turning the situation over and over in my mind. The bank was moving forward with foreclosure. My parents were about to lose the only home I had ever known, and I was the one holding the keys they had given me as a final gesture. I parked in the circular driveway and sat there for almost 15 minutes before I could make myself get out. The morning light filtered through the live oaks, casting long shadows across the wraparound porch. The house looked the same as it always had, grand, beautiful, and suddenly fragile.
I turned the key in the front door and stepped inside. The silence was deafening. No voices, no clatter of dishes, no sound of my mother on the phone with clients, just the faint tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway and the creak of the old floorboards under my shoes. I walked through every room slowly, touching things I hadn't touched in years. The kitchen table where they had told me my wedding didn't matter, the staircase where I used to slide down the banister as a child, my old bedroom, still exactly as I had left it 4 years ago. The quilt my grandmother made was still folded at the foot of the bed. I sat on the edge of the mattress and let the tears come. This house had been part of me once. It had held every birthday, every Christmas morning, every late-night talk with my mother when I was a teenager. It had also held the moment they told me I was dead to them if I chose my own path. I didn't know how long I sat there. The sun had moved across the room when I finally stood up and wiped my face. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was my mother. "I'm at the library, helping set up for story time. I didn't want to bother you, but I thought you should know your father is being discharged tomorrow. He asked if you might want to come by the house one last time, before everything is packed." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "I'm already here." She replied instantly, "I'll be there in 20 minutes. I waited on the front porch steps, the same steps where I had taken prom pictures alone because my parents were at a client event. When my mother's car pulled up, she got out alone. No father, no Julian, just her. She walked up slowly and sat down beside me on the steps. We didn't speak for a long time. Finally, she said, "The movers come next week. We are selling what we can. The bank is taking the rest. Your father and I are moving into a small condo downtown. Julian and Claire will keep the business running." I nodded. "I don't want the house," I said quietly. "Not like this. Not as some kind of guilt payment." My mother looked at me, eyes shining but steady. "Then let us do one last thing right," she said. "Let us sell it and put the money into a trust for you and Marcus, for your future, for the life you built without us. It's not payment. It's acknowledgement that we were wrong." I looked out across the lawn toward the mountains. "I don't need the money," I said, "but I do need something else." She waited. "I need you to keep showing up the way you have the last few weeks. Not because the business is failing. Not because Dad had a heart attack. Because you want to. Because you finally see me. Every Saturday at story time. Every time I invite you to dinner.
every small moment. No grand gestures, just consistency.
Tears slipped down her cheeks. I can do that, she whispered. I will do that for the rest of my life if you'll let me. We sat there until the sun started to dip behind the mountains. Then we walked through the house one last time together. She pointed out little things I had forgotten. The dent in the banister from when I was 7, the spot on the kitchen floor where I had spilled red paint in 3rd grade. We laughed and cried in the same breath. When we locked the door behind us, she handed me the keys again. These are yours now, she said. Whatever you decide to do with them. I took them. 2 weeks later, my father was discharged from the hospital. He looked thinner, but stronger. The whole family gathered at the small condo they had rented downtown for a quiet dinner. No business talk, no pressure. Just food, stories, and the kind of careful conversation that comes when everyone is trying not to break something fragile. Julian brought Claire. They were quieter now, more thoughtful. My mother helped in the kitchen without taking over. My father told jokes that actually made me laugh. At the end of the night, my mother walked me to the door. I signed up for the library volunteer training permanently, she said. I'll be there every Saturday from now on, no matter what. I hugged her then. It was the first real hug I had given her since the wedding. I believe you, I whispered. Marcus and I drove home in the quiet night. When we pulled into our driveway, I turned to him. I think I'm ready to let them back in, I said. Not all the way, not like before, but a little, on my terms. He smiled and kissed my forehead. That sounds like the right amount. The following Saturday, my mother was at the library exactly on time. She read to the kids, helped clean up, and stayed afterward to talk about books with me. No mention of the company, no pressure. Just her showing up. My father called the next week to say the house had sold. The money went into a trust for Marcus and me. No strings, no expectations. Julian texted me a photo of him and Claire at a small private dinner. No parties, the caption read. Just us learning how to be a family. Slowly, carefully, we started building something new. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when old hurts rose up. There were still times I needed space, but they respected it now. They showed up in the small ways I had asked for, and I let them. If you have ever been told by your own family that your happiness came second to their plans, drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. Looking back, I realized the most powerful thing I learned wasn't how to forgive them completely. It was how to forgive myself for wanting their love in the first place, and how to keep choosing my own peace, even while slowly letting them back into my life on my own terms. Some families break you so you can learn how strong you can become without them. Mine did that. And then, in the gentlest way possible, they started learning how to love the woman I had become without them. I'm still learning how to let them, but for the first time, I believe we might actually get there.